on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37. It's O'Connor and Company. A very busy Tuesday morning, and we'll get you up to speed on everything you need to know so that you're informed and hopefully entertained along the way. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. And Julie, we've got our pal Gordon Chang right now, China expert, distinguished senior fellow at Gatestone Institute, and author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Follow him at Gordon G. Chang, please. It's a very vital Twitter feed that will keep you informed and educated. Hey, Gordon, good morning.
Good morning, Larry and Julie.
So a lot to talk about here with the president's trip to Asia. First, the summit itself, the G20 summit in India. A lot of people look at India as a very viable option for America's manufacturing interests should we find the need to disinvest from that manufacturing base in China. In fact, I would argue, and I think you would argue as well, that it's incumbent on us to begin that process now. We should be phasing out of our reliance on Chinese manufacturing, and India could very well be the best option. So given that, what did you make of the president's performance in India, and what was the Chinese reaction?
Well, I think President Biden had a very good couple days in New Delhi. But it's largely not because of his efforts, but because Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, decided to skip the G20 for some reason, and we don't know exactly why. Could be because the Chinese wanted to really give India a hard time, or it could be because Xi Jinping felt he couldn't leave China due to the internal problems. But the point is, President Biden had a clear field, and he took advantage of it. So that was good. But we got to remember that the president could have done more in India. And indeed, I think that Biden has a lot to go to make up the damage that he has caused for basically 2.5 years of atrocious diplomacy.
Mm-hmm. And given that, Gordon, was his decision to stop in Vietnam and spend a lot of time with their prime minister, was that a smart idea? Because it seems to me if you are trying to curry favor, if I can say curry in this context, with the Indian government, then to immediately go to Vietnam, who could be another potential manufacturing rival in that area and who has much closer ties with China, I would think that that would actually be a bit of a faux pas.
Yeah, I actually thought going to Vietnam was a good thing.
Okay.
And because really we need all the friends that we can.
Gordon, did we lose you? See, this is what happens.
The Chinese.
It was obviously the Chinese. Couldn't, not the Vietnamese. They would do that. All right, we'll reconnect with Gordon there in a moment. He makes a good point. We do need all the friends we can get. Although, I mean, I always assumed that Vietnam has a much closer relationship with China than they do with us. But you know, if you give countries in Asia a reason to latch on to anybody other than Beijing, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to just take for granted that Beijing holds the entire Pacific Rim. Yeah.
Right. And we've tried to keep up good diplomatic relations with Vietnam. So I think it was a smart move.
Except that he looked like a buffoon
Well, of
there.
course, and I know, that's the problem.
What do you like? I quote you all the time now. He has mashed potato for brains.
He does.
It's the only explanation. Gordon, do we have Gordon back? Thank you, Gordon. You were in the middle of saying we need all the friends we can get there in Asia.
Yeah, we certainly do. And Vietnam is a country that does want to be a friend, and its longstanding American policy goes well back before Biden of establishing those ties. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Vietnam has some problems of its own, especially human rights, but we're in an existential struggle. Many people say we're losing. And right now, I think that we can overlook human rights violations in Vietnam because this is a matter of life or death for the United States.
Gordon, I'm interested in this upcoming meeting between North Korea and Russia. This has happened before. There have been Putin, meetings with the North Korean leadership before. But what do you make of this new one? And is this sort of an attempt to buy arms from Russia? Is this sort of an attempt by North Korea to sort of work on that alliance between Russia and China and strengthen that alliance? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think Vladimir Putin does want to buy arms from North Korea. He knows that the United States doesn't like it. But also, on the other hand, we huff and puff a lot. Our sanctions against Russia have not been effective as they need to be in the circumstance. Kim Jong-un has looked at years, actually decades, of American warnings not to do this or not to do that, but we don't follow up. So I think that the Russians and the North Koreans are emboldened to violate a lot of sanctions with these arms sales from Pyongyang to Moscow. So, the Biden administration has issued another warning. They got to follow up and do something. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the bad guys around the world see this and they take advantage of it.
As you mentioned, Gordon, China wasn't there, but boy, they were certainly the topic of conversation. And for some reason, some inexplicable reason, President Biden, whenever given the opportunity, would constantly repeat the same line. He said it like 3 different times. I don't want to contain China. We're not here to contain China. I'm not trying to hurt China. But I mean, first of all, shouldn't we be trying to contain China? And by continuing saying that you're not doing that, it sort of is a tell that that's exactly what you're doing. I think the president doth protest too much.
Well, first of all, the Chinese don't believe American presidents, including Biden, when they say, oh, we're not trying to contain China.
Right.
Now, the other thing, though, Biden shouldn't say that. And the reason is China has been stealing hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property each year. They kill about 75,000 Americans with doses of illicit Chinese fentanyl that the Communist Party is behind. They release COVID-19 beyond their borders. Yeah. We don't know how the disease started, but they deliberately spread it beyond their borders. That's 1.1 million Americans who have died from that disease. And China's preparing for war against the United States. So, yeah, you don't say, well, we're not trying to contain this country, which is attempting to destroy the United States. And also, you don't say, as Biden did, I want to see them succeed economically. What you say is the United States will defend itself, its friends, and its partners, and it will do everything possible to make sure that China does not take down the U.S.
We got to leave it there. Gordon Chang. Again, the Twitter feed is Gordon G. Chang, and I do commend that Twitter feed to you because Gordon knows his stuff. Yeah. And you always get smarter after reading it. Thanks, Gordon. Always good to talk to you, my friend.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Julie.
It is 6